What's going on, guys? Jackson here. Welcome back to this week's video. And today I want to talk to you about how to invest. So one thing I want to say right off the bat is this video is for educational purposes only. And if you plan on following anything in this video, you should always consult a professional investor before taking action. Today I want to talk to you guys about the 5 ways that you can save and invest in your 20s so you can be wealthy in your 30s. Starting off with number 5, and that's going to be paying off any outstanding debt. Now, in my mind, debt can either be a blessing or a sin. If you're taking on debt that's going to yield you more money in the end with low risk, then yeah, that makes sense. However, where you get into trouble is taking on debt that you can't pay back, especially things like credit card that have very high interest rates. That's where you can really get yourself into trouble. I think it's pretty clear, but any sort of income that you'd make from investing would basically be eaten away by having high debt with high interest. So things like student loans, personal loans, cars, anything like that that's going to have an extremely high interest rate should be either sold or gotten rid of immediately. Moving on to number 4, and that's building an emergency fund. When doing the research for this video, I was absolutely blown away that almost 30% of the United States population doesn't have a funded emergency fund. The reasoning for having one is if you unexpectedly lose your job, if something happens that you're no longer to produce income, say there's a medical emergency, you want to make sure that you're going to be taken care of financially in case something or problem were to arise. I think it's best to have 3 to 5 months covered for all living expenses. That way, in case something happens more long term, you're able to still provide for your family or for yourself or whoever you're taking care of. For example, if your yearly expenses are $25,000, it's a good idea to have around $12,000 saved in case something were to go wrong. This isn't money you should invest. This is money that you should have in a high yield savings account that I'll talk about more later on. One of the worst things other to not having an emergency fund is having an emergency fund that is locked in something like a CD or having it invested where that it could lose value just overnight. If you absolutely have to have this money invested somewhere, look to have this money invested in something that's very safe. The stock market is not a great place to put this money just because of the volatility from day-to-day transactions. Moving on to number 3, and that's looking for a good investment app. And I say app specifically because I rarely use any sort of desktop interface to manage my investments. There's a lot of really good apps out there like E-Trade and Webull, Robinhood that you can manage your investments very easily from your phone. Speaking of investing, Webull's running a promotion this month where if you deposit into your account, you can get 2 free stocks valued anywhere between $12 and $1,400. Link in the description. And then when it comes to looking for things to invest in, I would stay away if you really don't know what you're doing from individual stocks and really just focus on ETFs. And if you don't know what an ETF is, it's an exchange traded fund. Essentially, instead of owning a particular company, it's a collection of multiple companies into one stock. That way, instead of putting all your eggs in one basket with one company, you have the diversification across multiple different companies in case one of them is to do poorly. Now, there's a lot of different markets that you can invest your money into, so I recommend doing research to find which one that you're interested in and then finding the best ETF for that particular market. One of the things I would stay away from would be looking to have an actively managed mutual fund just because these are really subject to high fees. While you may get more ROI from your stocks and investments, you're subject to higher management fees because of having the actively managed portfolio. When doing the research for this video, I found that when you look past from the 3, 5, 10, or 15 years, only about 15% of all professional mutual fund investors end up beating the S&P 500. Because of this, if the professionals aren't able to beat the market, you're not making as much money. Therefore, why would you put money with them when you can do the work yourself and then make more money in the long term? Now, if it's just from a comfort thing where you don't feel comfortable managing your own money, that's perfectly acceptable. And by all means, do what you feel comfortable doing. But just looking at the data from previous examples, you make the call. Moving on to number 2, and we have banking. And I know this one may be a little interesting for some people, but consider the bank that you're currently investing at. For example, until about a year ago, I was banking at just a normal bank, and I didn't really consider looking into other banks because I didn't know any differently. I then saw that Discover was running a promotion at the time where if you deposited $15,000, you could get an extra $250. A lot of the time now, banks are starting to offer these sign-up bonuses and higher interest rates for a promotional period in order to get you on board and then lowering their interest rates, which isn't something that you want. If you're going to be switching to a bank, personally, I would like to switch to one where I know my investments are going to be safe and I'm going to continue to earn the advertised interest rate per year. As of right now, I'm doing my banking with Discover and I'm earning an annual interest rate of 1.6%. Also, the interest rate isn't just the most important thing to keep in mind. You also want to make sure there's no maintenance fees, just because these can get really annoying and eat into your profits that you would make. You also want to keep in mind that essentially this isn't really making you money in the sense of it's just keeping up with inflation. If you calculate inflation at around 2% per year, you're basically just keeping your same amount of money that you had the previous year. Once again, banks are able to do this because they know that if they can get you as a customer, you're more than likely to open either a credit card, take out a loan, or do other sorts of investment with that bank because you've had prior experience with them. They may be taking an upfront loss by giving you a higher interest rate, but the long-term benefits is in their favor, hoping that you'll take out a loan at a higher interest rate and then be paying them the money. Another thing to keep in mind is that these rates are subject to change at any time. When I moved my investments to Discover at first, they were running a promotion at 2.2% APY. Now, since the feds have lowered the rates, the banks are required to lower theirs as well. That's why Discover lowered their rates too. Moving on to number one, and I know I just made a video talking about this one, but I really think it's one of the most important points that you can do is making sure you maximize your employer benefits. Using things like employer match is one of the most important things you can do to building wealth in your 20s. If your company offers something like 401k match or Roth IRA match, it's extremely important to make sure that you take advantage of it. That way you have consecutive years of compound interest to grow that investment. Now, if you're a government employee or a teacher, you're a little bit different because you don't pay into 401k like normal people do. The government has something called a TSP, which is a thrift savings plan, and teachers pay into something a little bit different called State Teachers Retirement System. Something like that. I'm not a teacher, I don't know. Again, those two things work a little bit differently. So if you're in those two caveats, be sure to do the sufficient research so you can make sure that you're maximizing the value that you can get from your investments. With that being said, guys, I really want to thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the like button as it really helps this video out and shows YouTube that this is a good video. And be sure to hit the subscribe button to see more content similar to this one. Thanks, guys. See you next time.